I really needed the werewolf treatment, like in the movies where the guy's going to turn into a werewolf. So they like chain him to the rock when the moon comes out. Like I needed to be chained to the rock. And I can still remember when they took me into inpatient rehab and that door locked behind me, like this feeling of just like relief and like, oh my gosh, I can't hurt myself anymore.
Yo, I'm Bryce the Third.
And I'm Liz McKean.
And you are now tuned in to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. Here we dive into all the recovery stories from around the world.
And we talk about all pathways because there's no one right way to recover.
If you've been with us for a while, you know how powerful stories are. So get ready for your community to get just a little bigger today.
We are so glad that you're here. Let's get into the show.
Liz, what is up? How you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. That was a great way to start. How are you feeling?
I'm good. Still trying to figure out this new intro and how to splice that with how we come in real time. So we're gonna figure it out just like we always do. How is your energy?
It's great now. I love that the start of this podcast was Liz. that was some good Liz energy. I am excited to be talking to you and our awesome guest, and I'm in a new space which feels fresh and full of possibilities, and it's a good day. How is yours?
Beautiful. I am in a space that feels fresh and full of gnats, and there's these little flying bug bodies all over. And it is, I think today will be a on-point conversation because the person that we have here to talk to today has traversed a path similar to me in respecting all life, trying not to kill gnats, and sitting in the things that can try to tickle my soul in a way and allowing for it and figuring out what that means to me and like what these things that are popping up say about my human experience. And I'm excited to have this conversation. So who do we have here today? Liz.
We have this wonderful human who, by the way, hopped in kind of last minute today. We had a plan to bring him on this season, and then he just like so kindly just hopped in here and filled the spot. So we're grateful on a million levels for Randy Hall, who is the former president of Recovery Dharma Global, which is one of our very favorite partners on the Phoenix app. He's also a smart recovery facilitator, another of our favorite partners on the Phoenix app. We've got a lot of favorite partners, just full disclosure. And he's just been like an enormous just support since we started this kind of partnership journey. Anytime we want, like suggestions, feedback, like ways to collaborate, we hop on a call and like he's already doing it, like already reaching out to other organizations. And I'm just so excited to hear about, a little more about his story and just to get to know him more. And eventually I'll let him talk. We'll see. I just keep going and nobody's here to stop me. So anyways, Randy, thank you for being here. Welcome. And how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Bryce. It's great to be here. I'm so excited to talk about Recovery Dharma and Smart Recovery and the Phoenix app, which has been an amazing partner to both those organizations and has really streamlined people's ability to get on and find a meeting anytime, any hour of any day, and connect with others in the community and find Phoenix events and partner events. And it's really been a blessing and a joy to work with y'all. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and do this as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you talk about partnership, like there's the container of partnership, but partnership doesn't happen without humans, and Randy, you just have been such a phenomenal human. Probably, I'm sure before I knew who you were, but in the entire time of knowing who you were, like you just been a dope human being. Like even today's podcast record, and it was a short notice. We had somebody drop out of the recording slot, and for some reason, you were on Liz and I's mind simultaneously. Hit up Randy and see if he'd be willing to slide through. And you were able to show up short notice, and so have you always been of that energy?
Oh, absolutely not. Like if you knew me more than 6 years ago, I was one of the most like erratic and unreliable people that you could imagine.
Mm,
But through recovery and through connecting with others and connecting with myself, I discovered kind of a secret, which is that the best way to help myself is actually to help others and to be available to others. And so I've tried to make that sort of my mantra over the last 5.5 years. And the less I think about myself and the more I think about and help others, the better I seem to feel about myself and the better I seem to behave out in the world as a human. So I have made it a big part of my practice in life over the last few years to talk and share as much as possible about the things that have helped me. So any opportunity to do that, I'm always jumping at the chance. And I really appreciate this opportunity to share with people about the things that have helped me, with the understanding that for every unique individual, there will be a unique path of recovery that's best. And just because something worked for me doesn't necessarily mean it will work for someone else. But I find that there's a real empowerment in having choices when it comes to recovery, and that recovery is not a one size fits all thing, much like nothing is really, even clothes, right? If it says one size fits all, it usually doesn't actually fit everyone or anyone. So, being able to share about these multiple pathways and having avenues like this to do that are sacred to me.
that's crazy. I know somebody out there is listening that put a one size fits all hat on and it didn't fit. It's like, what are you saying about my head? I'm interested. The reason I asked the question is because I can sense, I think because of my own path, people who have had to work to be who it is that they are. And some of the best people I know like weren't always that way, and it actually they were on the opposite side of the spectrum. The pendulum swung, and then they are who they are now because of a practice. I'm curious: is the self-centeredness and selfishness, is that still something that you feel, and you are acting opposite of that, or do you just not feel that anymore because of the practices that you put into play?
Oh, I certainly still feel those things from time to time. It's human to feel those things. When we get into recovery, frequently people are channeled into the 12 steps, which is, the most popular program, and for a long time was the only program. And I know in that program, having worked the steps, that there is a focus on, in the fourth step, like looking at your behaviors from the lens of like, taking accountability, cleaning up your side of the street, that type of thing. And I think that that's important for everyone's recovery journey. But I also recognize that people engage in addictive behavior for numerous reasons, and that it's not always just born out of selfishness and self-centeredness. Frequently, there's deep trauma. Frequently, there is some kind of physical injury that leads to use. Sometimes there's co-occurring disorders where people are self-medicating. And then sometimes just due to the frequency, intensity, and duration of use, right? People get addicted. And then, there's a genetic predisposition as well that they've identified. So there's all these things happening. And to try to just boil it down to like, and tell someone it's because they're selfish and self-centered, I can see how that can have like a shame-inducing, stigmatizing. So that's certainly part of what was happening with me, is that I didn't want to feel pain, and I wanted to feel good and control my feelings all the time. Like it was really that illusion of being able to control, repress, enhance my feelings that led me to most of my ingestion of mood altering substances. But of course, like recovery isn't a magic wand where suddenly you stop behaving. If anything, like you become more aware, right, of those underlying, I would call them parts of my humanity. Other programs might call them character defects, but it's human to not want to feel pain. Even the smallest paramecium, when it senses something, it'll move away from it, right, and move towards something pleasurable. That's kind of the algorithm for life. But human beings are in this weird position where it can no longer help us to be that way, right? Because we're constantly seeking that pleasure and pushing away from things that we don't like. And so often the cure for the pain is in the pain. The cure is sitting in the pain, experiencing the distress, feeling the feeling to heal the feeling. And that's something that takes practice. That's why we call it a practice, right? Because when you're not used to doing that, like I was for 20 years, I coped with every problem the same way.
Mm.
When you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And
Yeah.
no matter what discomfort I was experiencing, I had a solution. And it was a solution that worked at first, but then over time began to harm me. And the relief that I got from that solution got shorter and shorter, and the consequences that came from it got bigger and longer.
Mhm.
And that was a blessing for me, because I eventually experienced so much pain that the solution had become the problem.
Mm.
And that, unfortunately, that's really the only way I learn things, right? Is the hard way. So I had to learn really. I had to go way down before I came back up.
Mm.
Yeah. Gosh, I feel like it's so interesting, back to your metaphor about the one size fits all. And I'm thinking of that person trying to put the hat on and the hat doesn't fit, and how I think so many of us, we don't blame the hat. We blame our stupid misshapen head. Like, what is wrong with me? This hat doesn't fit. It says one size fits all. And I believe this tag, as opposed to like believing in the integrity of my noggin, and I think so often it's amazing how much we want to find everything but the thing as like the core of like what is hurting or something. Like even just sitting in the pain, because I've definitely noticed this. I mean, this happens almost every single day. When something is uncomfortable, my first thought is usually, how do I make this go away? I don't want to feel uncomfortable, and I'm in recovery, and I think I still see nails a lot of the time, like, how do I pound this away? And also, I assume it's because there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong. This is bad. If I feel uncomfortable, like, this is bad, as opposed to that, blessed pause that on good days I'm able to find and look at it. And sometimes, like you said, that discomfort is like the greatest blessing. I mean, the most uncomfortable things in my life has been the things that have brought me, paved new roads to something that I never thought I would find, whether that was relationships or, or sobriety or a cooler hat. You never know. But I know. So you said that you had, speaking of, hats that maybe weren't the right size, like you had done the 12 steps, and I know, recovery Dharma is part of your path, smart recovery is part of your path, and I think for someone who's in this world that we're in of recovery, and certainly, we're being in the profession of recovery, we throw those names around and they're very well known. But I know before I needed any of it, I had never heard of these things. I certainly didn't know how to find them. And when I first went to 12 step, it was wonderful to be able to find a meeting where there were people that I could, say, this is what's happening, and they would understand. And also, that just wasn't my path. And never in a million years would it have occurred to me to look for something different. I just thought, this doesn't fit me, and therefore I'm wrong. And now, like you said, there's these options, and just because one isn't for me doesn't mean it's not for somebody else. It's so beautiful that they can all exist. So if you don't mind, after that very long preamble, talking a little bit about like what your path looked like, trying out this buffet of options that are here, and where you land today, I would just love your take.
Absolutely. My story, really, for about 25 years, I drank alcohol and smoked marijuana on a daily basis. And then for about 15 years, I ingested like large quantities of amphetamines on a daily basis. And I kind of had this magical belief that there would be no consequences, right, to the way that I was abusing myself and my body. And it turns out I was wrong, because in 2017, I contracted this rare disease called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And they don't know why I contracted it. It could have been any number of things, but it is possible that there was like some neurotoxicity in my brain from just the sheer cocktail of things that I was doing to myself. And basically what happened to me is I was coaching my daughters I have 3 daughters, and I was coaching my middle daughter's under-6 soccer game. And if you've ever seen under-6 soccer, like all the kids kind of just like follow the ball like a bumblebee swarm. And so I was the coach, and I was kind of like running behind the swarm, trying to get them to like stop picking flowers and like play soccer. And both of my big toes on my right and left foot, they both started like tingling simultaneously. And I thought, that's so weird. It feels like my feet are falling asleep, but I'm running. And then over the course of the next 24 hours, that tingling feeling like ascended up my body. And after about 48 hours, I was like having trouble breathing. So they took me to the ICU and they diagnosed me with this Guillain-Barré syndrome. And I spent the next 45 days like totally locked in my body, paralyzed from the top of my head to the tips of my toes. I was obviously unable to communicate or see or breathe or eat or any of those things. It was really quite a hellish time. I was also withdrawing from all of my drugs, but nobody really knew that because I was very adept at hiding what I was doing. So I had a really, really bad time and traumatic time during those 45 days. And then it took another 5 months or so in various neurorehabilitation hospitals for me to learn to walk and talk and feed myself and do all of those things again. And you guys will probably believe this. Most people don't. But the first thing that I did when I could walk and talk and do things again was I went out and started drinking and doing drugs again, even after that insanely painful experience, where the universe or God or whatever you want to call it had come down and physically stopped me from being able to hurt myself. Even after all of that pain and suffering and collateral damage to my family, I went out and I started doing it again. And I recognized very quickly that I wasn't going to last long now because my body had deteriorated and atrophied, and I just couldn't drink and use like I had previously. And I was going to die very quickly if I was to continue. So thanks to some external consequences and pressure from my family, I went to treatment, and I tried outpatient treatment, and it didn't really work. And it wasn't their fault. It was my fault. I really needed the werewolf treatment, like in the movies where the guy's going to turn into a werewolf. So they like chain him to the rock when the moon comes out. Like yeah. I needed to be chained to the rock. Like I needed to be taken somewhere. And I can still remember when they took me into inpatient rehab and that door locked behind me, like this feeling of just like relief and like, oh my gosh, I can't hurt myself anymore. Like I was so relieved. So I spent about 45 days inpatient, and every night they would put us on the druggie buggy and they would take us to a different AA meeting. And we went all over. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. We went all over the greater Birmingham metropolitan area so that we could see all the different home groups. And I saw a lot of people getting a lot of healing in those rooms. And it was really amazing to me because like as you travel on the buggy, no matter where we went in town, people had stories about that neighborhood and things that they did there. And it was really refreshing to realize that close to all of those bars and clubs and dealers' houses, there was a room where people were going and they were healing together. So while that was very it made me optimistic, the actual philosophical underlying principles of the 12 steps did not resonate with me. The idea of powerlessness, again, that kind of selfish and self-centered lens. There was just things that I didn't like about the languaging. Now I did work the steps with a sponsor. It took 9 months. We did the NA workbook, which is really, it's a lot and it's good though. Like I got a lot of healing from doing that, but I had this feeling even then that it wasn't going to work for me long-term. And I was getting concerned. So one day I was up in the inpatient psych hospital and, they said, do you want, it was in a hospital. So they had various, chaplains, right, who worked at the hospital. And they're like, do you want to talk to a chaplain? And I had not grown up religious. So I was like, no, I don't want to talk to the chaplain. And they're like, oh, we got this Buddhist chaplain. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about Buddhism, but I am really bored. I can't have my phone or watch TV. I'm tired of coloring. So sure, send up the Buddhist chaplain and I'll talk to this guy. So they sent up this guy. His name was Al Cotton. And he sat with me for about 60 minutes and I told him a little bit of my story. And he told me about the foundational principles of Buddhism, which are the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And he explained to me how these spiritual practices weren't even really religious. They were really just like an ethical framework for living your life. And really the object was to suffer less. And looking out the window of the psych hospital, I wanted to suffer less. And he told me there were these meetings where they use Buddhist practices and principles to recover from addiction. And he gave me a book called Refuge Recovery. And he encouraged me to read it and to try one of these meetings. And I actually like petitioned the people at the rehab, like, hey, will you take us one night to this meeting instead of to the AA meeting? And they said, sure, we'll do that. And we did that. And I remember just walking in that night, and like the energy was different than in any other meeting that I had been to. The people there seemed like they were living with ease. They were laughing. They seemed like they were actually friends. We did a loving kindness meditation at the beginning of the meeting. And I just had this feeling in my chest. And I was like, what is this feeling? It feels like warm and light and beautiful. And I could recognize just a little bit that it was self-compassion. And it was something that I had not really felt previously. And a big reason that I didn't take care of myself in active addiction is because I didn't care about myself. I actively harmed myself because I didn't care about myself. So being able to cultivate even a little bit of that felt euphoric. And I thought, I'm going to do this program, and I'm going to, because like I want what these people have, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's what I started to do. And that program has obviously been so beneficial to me in kind of cultivating those positive mental states and that self-compassion, that generosity, that self-forgiveness. At the same time, it's a very heart-centered practice, recovery Dharma. I mean, it can be good for your mind as well, but I also complement it with smart recovery, because smart recovery, which is something they also introduced to us while we were inpatient, it's based on cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's really good about like looking and observing your thoughts and disputing your irrational beliefs. You know, you wake up in the morning and you say, I'm not going to do it today. I'm not, you know, today's the day I quit. And then by 3 p.m. or sometimes by 10 a.m.
I was going to say 3 p.m. might have been a stretch for me.
Yeah, sometimes by 10 a.m. you're making a different choice, a choice that's harmful. So the question is like, what am I believing that's making me go in this other direction, and really being able to identify that, again, in a compassionate way, not in a way where you like slap the wrist and you shame yourself. I love that they're both like stigma free. You don't identify as anything at the meeting. You don't collect chips or anything if you have a relapse. Relapses are learning opportunities in both programs, something to, treasure as an opportunity for further growth, not something where you're to be shamed before the group and go back to the beginning. So not that they do that. I don't want to I always go into these things and I say, I'm not going to say anything negative about the 12 steps. And then I feel like I always end up denigrating the 12 steps, but I don't want to do that, because I know millions of people have gotten a lot of healing in those rooms. And honestly, to me, all of these programs are just the same tea in different cups. Yeah. Okay. They're all based on the same universal principles: community, self-reflective practices, helping others helps me. And really, it's really just which one appeals to you most, which one most resonates with you. And again, like what works for me may or may not work for you. And finding that unique path of recovery and trying different things and just, like a little appetizer sampler. That's what I always encourage to people who are going inpatient or in outpatient recovery. Like, you may think you don't like this, but like have an open mind, because you don't really know till you experience it,
Yeah. Also, I don't like this has not been an accurate gauge for whether something is good for me or not.
Absolutely. Like when I got Guillain-Barré syndrome and I was paralyzed for all those months, that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And the second greatest thing that ever happened to me is when I had to go to rehab. Now, when both of those things were happening to me, I was like, these are the worst things that have ever happened to me. So I always have to be careful when I judge anything as good, bad, wrong, right, because like in time, there's like this magical maybe where it's like, maybe this will turn out better for me because of this. Maybe this thing that I feel like is dumping on me is really fertilizing me for further growth.
But ultimately, it is.
Yeah.
It is. And I think that was, at least in my experience, my thing with life is life will present me something that like I can't be and this be at the same time. Like there's no way that I could be in a world or in a circumstance or around this person and like be okay with it. And so like I would break out in glitches, like and whatever that would look like. And I would self-medicate to like keep those glitches from glitching. And the practices that I picked up through Buddhism, through different religions, through 12-step. I'm a member of a 12-step. I'll say it. I'm a member of AA. And that was something that gave me a way of living that allowed for me to allow life to life while I have the space to be me. and then that was like, oh, I'm no longer in full flight from this. So to hear you say like these things that some people would have judged as super terrible being the best thing that have happened to you, and then had been the worst thing that had happened to you, is both, because the thing is the thing, but how do I show up and how I relate to that thing is part of like my process. And how do I desire to show up? How do I desire to be able to contribute to life? And I think for me, the contribution conversation was second. The relate to life conversation was second. What was first was like, yo, I kind of just don't want to do what I was doing anymore. You saw how you looked out the window when you was talking to the chaplain, and it's like, well, yeah, I want to suffer less. Like, I'm open, so that's you got a phenomenal story.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I love what you said. I always think to myself, there's nothing more dangerous than getting what I actually want, right? Because I rarely know what's best for me. And that's why I go into the meeting spaces and I go to therapy and I self-disclose what's happening in my mind and my heart and my body and my spirit. And then I can receive feedback from someone who has more experience than me. And then I can choose to incorporate that in a way that's healthy for me. And that's really what we do in those spaces, is like that reciprocity of like, I'll sit in your pain with you and you'll sit in my pain with me. And that healing moment when I'm sharing in a meeting about something going on with me and I see the pressure behind someone else's eyes and I see that they have that compassion for me. And then that makes it okay for me to have it for myself as well. And I think of that as like such a beautiful gift. And it's a gift that people who try to do it on their own, like they never get to experience that. And to me, it's like kind of like, the myth of Sisyphus, he had to roll that rock up of the mountain every day. And, this idea that like, we don't have to do that alone and we don't have to roll the rock at all. We can just like sit together and chill out next to the rock. And I think that a lot of recovery is just that. I went into it thinking it was going to be this grand self-improvement project and I was going to be my best self. And the longer that I've done it, the more I recognize that it's not a self-improvement project, but a self-acceptance project. It's a project aimed at loving myself, and that's all parts of myself, and not rejecting any of them, because to the extent that I'm rejecting certain aspects of myself, that will manifest through behavior that harms myself. And anytime I harm myself, everything is interconnected. So there will be a karmic ripple where other people will then become the collateral damage of my implosion. And really with the aim being to just suffer as little as possible. In early recovery, everybody's on that pink cloud and the goal is to be happy. And then over time, it's like, I just want to suffer less. I just want to move through the world and not harm myself and others and have some presence and peace, and that's a beautiful gift that recovery gives us.
Yeah, because suffering, so pain, we can't avoid pain. Being not comfortable, being uncomfortable, being awkward, being faced with pressure. These are things that are unavoidable. But what I've learned is that I don't have to suffer. I don't have to suffer. And there are tools, there are communities, there are practices that bring about the cessation of said suffering. And I can either choose to pick them up and use them or not. Like today with these nets, they're in the studio right now as we're recording. One had the audacity. I don't know if y'all seen it. If y'all are watching this and y'all go back and rewind, you see he came and made an appearance and came into the camera like, hello. But this morning I woke up and I'm literally like nauseous. Like I'm nauseous. I don't like my home has strangers in it and it doesn't feel good. And so my immediate reactions is one to be sad, be disgusted, and two to like be so angry that when I came down in the kitchen and it's 20 of them ready to jump me, like, what do you want to do, buddy? Like I'm like, okay, I got my towel, I'm ready to swing, and then when I hit one and I sink the little blood on my hand, I'm like, I'm a murderer, and that doesn't feel good. That's not what I want for my life. I wouldn't, if I was a gnat, like I wouldn't want somebody to just beat me up because I found a nice place to find food. And here he goes trying to drink my tea. But in that moment, I was able to kick in the practice of like, okay, what am I feeling? And then I took a breath and I felt it in my body. I feel my muscles are tense. I feel like my stomach is turning. I feel my head is, and I feel like the blue purpleness of like on the verge of like wanting to cry because I feel like my house is invaded with something that I don't want. And in that stop and pause moment, I'm able to show up not only for myself, but like for the Nets too. It's like, okay, so how can we move better so I'm not like squishing every net? And that has been for me like what recovery is. And like Randy, you said, like it's juice from the same cup. I've used a concept called straw theory, where it's like there's a truth, and it's like, say truth was a juice. The straw that we use to get the juice out of the cup is what's suited for us. And at one point, this straw works for me, and then it becomes like a Capri Sun straw where it's like I'm not getting enough truth. So then I might have to go and find another straw, and I might find another straw, and it's like, yo, this is like a boba straw. This is too much. I gotta find the straw that fits. And then there's been 30,000 seasons in my recovery where I've had to like find the straw that works for me. Yeah. And that might look like recovery Dharma. That might look like smart recovery. That might look like going and exercising. That may look like, sponsorship and 12-step from where I'm from. That may look like a whole bunch of things, but that's the beauty of like the continuity of this recovery process.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you don't have to know. You don't have to know. Like, I think, in the beginning, I look at, the Phoenix app, which is, what brought us all together here. And it's been a constant kind of like balancing act of figuring out how to make sure that all the resources are on there. So, our battle cry has been like, if you find one of us, you find all of us. If you find one of these resources, you're going to have access to all of them because we're all here. And having that be presented in a way that is, welcoming and encouraging and, like the choice that we all, crave, but also not overwhelming because it could also be like, here's all the things, pick one, and it can feel like, can I just not die? Like, I just want to just feel better. I want to just like not keep hurting myself, and often that is just the first thing that's put in front of you. And if that straw, like, you're not going to know whether you like that straw. Like you said, like, this might be something that you're like, I don't think this is right for me. This doesn't feel good, but you know what? I'm 48 hours sober. Nothing feels good. Nothing feels right. I don't even recognize myself in the mirror. So it's almost like the fact that you are showing up at all, like show up and just start trying telling the truth. Like those are like those teeny little things that I think it starts with, knowing that, that your array of straws is going to be, greater. And the real tool, the real resource is the people. You don't have to pick your path, like your first day on the recovery, job or whatever. Like, you just show up, and then there's people, and there's people that are reaching their hands out, and just take one of them, take one hand, and that's all. You don't have to have the wisdom to even care about gnats today. You know what I mean? Like, just show up, take a hand, and take that next breath. And all these choices, I feel like, are going to just allow that path to widen as time goes on. But it's so cool because all you got to do is show up. And there's just no wrong way to do that in the beginning. Just one step forward,
Definitely. Now, the beginning's all about that damage control, right? And just like putting a tourniquet on. And then, if you've ever seen somebody like construct a building, they always put the scaffolding all the way to the top at first. And then as they build it, they take away a little bit of scaffolding. And I always encourage people in early recovery, like, hey, any source of support, any resource that you can lean on, go for it. And then as you get going, you can remove some support. If you want. I've chosen to kind of remain deeply involved because it's been so helpful to me, and it's really become a big part of my recovery to be helpful to others. But for sure, like having different choices, different pathways, and then the way that they complement, like you don't have to pick one, like you said. And I love the Phoenix app. I love what you guys have done with that, and how it's helped the programs that I'm involved with so much to be in communication and partnership with each other, and realize that we can actually like lift each other up, that we are not in competition with each other. We don't believe like, I don't care how you get better. I just want you to get better. Like I'm not here to like say that one program is superior to another, but I do believe that having choices is superior to like forcing everybody into one avenue. So I really love what you guys have done. And again, like the way how it's so holistic as far as like taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And it supports all of those things, because ultimately recovery isn't about just not doing something. It's about cultivating a life that is so amazing that I want to be present in it, that I don't want to do anything that would take me out of it. And really like that, it's both like offensive and defensive in that way. And what you guys have created, like it's been a real honor and a privilege to be a part of it. And it's brought so many new people into our rooms, and hopefully it's introduced people from our rooms to other programs that have been helpful to them as well.
I think it definitely has. Yeah. And for somebody who maybe is just, well, first of all, just 100% with you on every single thing that you just said. Like I maybe we should just do a new intro and have just Randy introduce everything that we're doing, because that was just so beautifully put. So we got to do a little mic drop just because hell yeah. And also for someone who is, listening and might be, on one hand excited, on another hand possibly overwhelmed. And I know I honestly, I have very little experience with all the different programs, because I tried out a lot of the traditional route, and then I found Phoenix, and that was kind of the click for me. And I've been to one recovery Dharma meeting, and it was beautiful. But I had a buddy with me, and I know it's scary to just try out something new, and not know anyone. So if I was to walk into a recovery Dharma meeting, and actually maybe we could do this with SMART as well, what could I expect, knowing that everything's going to be a little different, case by case, place by place?
For sure. Recovery Dharma meetings typically begin with some short readings, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and what we call the practice, which is really just kind of like a short overview of our program. And during that portion, you would learn that our program is Buddhist inspired, but not required. The vast majority of our members are not Buddhists. They're just people who found these principles and practices to be helpful to them. You would learn that we are radically inclusive. We embrace people with all different types of addictions, including process addictions. And we encourage diversity and inclusivity and equity and accessibility in our spaces. We find that through celebrating those things, we actually can recover better when we can see from others' perspectives and recognize how society in general can sometimes be oppressive and cause suffering. We're trauma informed. You would learn that as well, which means we take kind of like the best modern understanding of science and addiction, and we put it together with these 2,600-year-old teachings to make something new. We're a compassion-oriented program, so there'll be no stigma. You can identify as whatever you want at the meeting, but most people will not identify as an alcoholic or addict. And it's holistic, like I was saying earlier. Like the aim of the program is really to grow and to cultivate a life that you don't want to escape from. So after those short readings, we would launch into like a 15-minute guided meditation. And that would typically be aimed at cultivating generosity, forgiveness, compassion, appreciative joy, loving kindness, equanimity, something that like when you leave the space, you're going to take with you in your affairs. And again, like a big part of that too, it's like counter programming, because in your addictive behavior and in my addictive behavior, like I had so many negative self-beliefs and beliefs about the world that were limiting. And when I believe those things, my mentor always says the problem with my beliefs is that I believe them. When I go out into the world and I have those glasses on, those pessimistic, nihilistic glasses, everything looks terrible, and I tell myself I'm a terrible person, and then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So doing those meditations and saying those phrases to yourself, it kind of like creates those new neural pathways. After that, there would typically be a reading from the Recovery Dharma book or a topic from the book or from other Buddhist-related literature. And then you'd see open sharing, much like you would see at a 12-step meeting, people just talking about the topic or where they are that day in their recovery. And then, so in many ways, it does it captures many of the same elements that you see in the 12-step spaces with, just that little Buddhist twist to it and a little more compassion oriented, I think. And a little more aimed at, again, cultivating that holistic life. Renunciation is part of the program, like abstinence from the substances. If I don't have abstinence from the substances, it's going to be very difficult for me to cultivate these other things. That's basically Recovery Dharma in a nutshell. We have inquiries in our book that are akin to the steps, so that there is a place for self-reflective practice with a mentor outside of the space, much like you'd see working the steps with a sponsor. We kind of replicate that. As far as Smart Recovery, it's really different actually than some of the other programs in that the Smart Recovery meeting is run by a trained facilitator. So, in order to run a Smart Recovery meeting, you have to go to this training. It's anywhere between 40 and 80 hours online. Then you take a test at the end. And then you can facilitate a meeting. Those meetings typically start with what's called a check-in. So everybody goes around and for a couple minutes, they just talk about what's going on with them that week. Maybe they had a lapse. Maybe they have a big event coming up that they want to get ready for and build motivation for to stay sober, or just maybe, whatever's going on with them mentally and emotionally. Then after that, you set the agenda. So people can raise their hand and they can say, hey, I've been having a lot of urges. I want to talk about how to cope with those. Or, hey, I've been having trouble building and maintaining motivation to stay sober. What can I do? Or, I've been having this persistent belief that life is no fun without alcohol or drugs. What can I do about that? Or I'm having trouble living a balanced life. Like it goes on and on. And then the facilitator will kind of divide up the time accordingly based on what people want to talk about. And then the rest of the meeting will be crosstalk. Now, to people from the other programs, that sounds super scary, right? You're like, what? Y'all are going to crosstalk each other? But here's the thing, oftentimes with my beliefs, again, the problem with my beliefs is that I believe them and I do not question them. And sometimes there's something that's so close to my face that it's like the horse with the blinders on. Like I can't see how it's irrational. So it's helpful to have other people there to kind of question and dispute my beliefs with me, not in a way where you wag your finger in someone's face and tell them that they're doing it wrong, but in a way that you say hey, I used to think that too. And here's what happened to me. So, someone comes to the meeting and they say, oh, I haven't drank in a year. I think I might start smoking marijuana because I never really had a problem with that. I wouldn't say to them, no, you shouldn't do that. But I would say, hey, I tried that exact experiment and here's what happened to me. So they can learn from my experience. They can take it or they can leave it. But again, I'm not telling them what to do so much as I'm just sharing my truth with them. Frequently during that portion of the meeting, we will work a tool together. And there are so many amazing tools in the Smart Recovery program that are all kind of aimed, again, at supporting those 4 pillars of how do I build and maintain motivation to not do this thing anymore that is not working for me? What are my values and how can I live in alignment with them? The second pillar is coping with urges. How can I deny and distract and escape and accept and substitute healthy things when I have these urges? How can I keep track of them so I know the things that are triggering me and I can find healthy and safe things to do when those things arise? The third pillar is managing my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We're going to use a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy tools, again, to dispute our irrational beliefs, to look at what's happening to us when we have these activating events that lead to these severe consequences. What is our thought process and how can we have that sacred pause where we intervene and we stop ourselves from repeating that harmful pattern? And then the last pillar is that living a balanced life. That idea that if I am living a balanced life, I will be less likely to become dysregulated and make a bad decision. And can I look at my life holistically and objectively and identify places that my program of recovery needs support, and places where just in general, like I want to have an improved lifestyle, so that, again, like so much of our using comes from our discomfort with reality. We don't like things the way that they are, and we want to change the way that we feel. And, oftentimes you'll hear people say, when you ask them, like, why did you use? They'll say, well, I finally just said F it, right? Like, the world was like everything I didn't like. The world was against me. You probably heard this before. Like everything was not how I wanted it to be. So I just said F it. And I always tell people, like, when you say F it, the only thing you're really effing is yourself. Like, like the world is staying exactly as it was. Like the only person that's getting harmed is you. So instead, like, can you unconditionally accept reality? Can you unconditionally accept yourself and recognize that this is just part of the human experience that you're having, and that everyone else is having the same experience? And it's really hard right now. And you can have compassion for yourself. It's like the thing with the gnats. I love how you mentioned the tea, because like that is my practice, and that is the practice that they've taught us in Recovery Dharma, which is that when I experience these intense emotions, to just recognize, like you were describing the bodily sensations, right? Like that's exactly the practice. Like, what am I feeling? Label it. And then where am I feeling it? And then just accepting it, like surfing that urge, riding that wave, seeing how it ebbs and flows, maybe investigating it, maybe asking myself, what's really going on here? Like my boss isn't happy with me, but what's underneath that, or whatever it is. These gnats are in my house. It's not about the gnats. It's about my feeling of safety and my inability to control, right? And then finally, like, that nurturing of yourself, and soothing yourself so that you don't go out and do something that causes even more harm. And like we call it having demons with our tea, or having tea with our demons, right? So like the idea is, when I have these emotions that I don't necessarily like, and I don't believe in negative emotions. Like emotions are just information. Like sadness and anger, they can spur me to take positive change in my life if I listen to them and don't run away from them. So I'll visualize these emotions as like demons or monsters. They kind of, in my mind, they look like the guys from Where the Wild Things Are. There's like big, and they'll come.
You got cute demons.
Yeah, man, they'll come to my door. It's kind of like an Inside Out thing where you create the character. Yes. They'll come to my door and they'll knock, and I will welcome them with a smile. I'll invite them in. I have a pretty pink tea set, and they will sit down with me, and I'll sit down with my anger, and I'll pour it a cup of tea, and I'll just put my arm around it, and I'll say, hey, like, what's really going on here? Like, how can I support you? And frequently, it almost always answers the same thing, no matter what emotion it is. It's, I don't like the way that I feel, right? And then I just put my arm around it and hug it. And then I take it to the door, I pat it on the back, and I send it on its way, and I release it. And again, like I'm feeling it to heal it. If I repress it, if I resist it, it will just persist. And I love that. I love that your gnat was actually going for your tea. It was actually trying to have the tea with you, because to me, that's the whole practice. Like, can I sit with my discomfort without running away? Can I accept that this is just the way it is right now? And that if I don't have to do anything to make it change, just like in a snow globe, the more I shake it, like the more agitated it will become. But if I just sit still with it, everything will settle in time. And frequently, that's the hardest thing to do as a human, though, isn't it? So that's why we come together in those circles and we practice these things together, because it is super hard.
Yeah, and having that community, that takes it to a whole nother level beyond myself and the limitations of what it is that I can envision that this thing could be when I'm in a room all alone. And then what I've learned too is oftentimes, especially like being in business or being an entrepreneur, like that sit and pause moment, like it allows, like, oh, I thought the solution was this, but it doesn't even have to be that. The problem with my beliefs is that I believe them. Like I got blinds in the living room, and there was like a little piece of blind that got broke last Christmas when somebody was decorating the house. And it's been like that for forever. So I finally got tired of it. I'm in the bathroom. I'm Googling blinds. And I'm like, I'm about to get these wood blinds. And the wood blinds were like $70. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to get two if I'm gonna put the wood blinds up. So it's $140 in the cart, and I'm about to press checkout. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I didn't press checkout. And then I ended up going to Home Depot and just getting like a pack of vinyl blinds for like $15. And like, but the in my mind, it's like, this is the only option. Like, I have to upgrade to the wood blinds, and then they have to be these, and I have to get two of them. So and then before you know it, you're spending $200 on a whim. Just like I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, what if I got a frog? Like, what if I got a frog, a couple of them, and put a frog in each room?
Whoa.
And then, you contribute to the circle of life, and everybody's happy.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, the idea of like even the broken blind that lets the light in, right? And the idea that like so often I see things that are broken and I don't like them, but there's beauty in the imperfection, that idea of like the Japanese art of kintsugi, right? Where when pottery breaks, they will glue it back together with that gold wax, and that things that have been broken can actually be rebuilt more beautifully and stronger than they were before they were broken. And I find that to be exactly what happens in these recovery rooms. Like, my addiction was a blessing to me. Like the spiritual lessons and wisdom that I have learned, the ways that has improved me as a human being, as a father, the awakening that I had because of that pain and because of that imperfection, which again is just part of the human experience. Like, I think that's beautiful, and I love the frog idea. Now you're really thinking like that's
now we're cooking.
Yeah, that's really amazing. That's cool.
Yeah, Randy. Do you need another job, because we could use a third podcast host? Because the way you bouncing back and forth with these metaphors,
I was gonna
you
say
belong
the same
here.
thing. I'm like, oh, you are our people. Like, oh, we just love a metaphor, and you've got some real good ones. And you don't do the thing that I do, which is like completely lose track of it, and suddenly it's like, what was the frog again? I don't even remember what it represented.
Yeah, maybe I'm just like having a good day with it. My friends will laugh because I speak of everything in like riddles and stories, and I find that like ritual and storytelling can really be impactful for people because then they can kind of project their own experience onto whatever it is that I'm talking about. And frankly, like through recovery, like so much of it is like an oral tradition where you're in the rooms and you're hearing things and then you're like implementing them in your life. And people will frequently come to me and they'll, I had an experience a few months ago where I was at a meeting and a newcomer needed help. This was a smart recovery meeting. And I was just like, I did not know what to say to this person. They were suffering so severely. And I could just feel that despair like in my chest. And one of the other members just launched into this beautiful soliloquy about what they should, like what they did and how it was helpful to them. And it was all about compassion and love and acceptance. And I was just like awestruck at the wisdom of this person. And after the meeting, I said to them, hey, like that was so beautiful. Like, where did you learn all that? And they said, oh, when I came here 18 months ago, that's what you said to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I had forgotten this wisdom. And by going back to that space in that room, I had remembered it. It had come back to me, like it had been transmuted from me to someone else and back to me as if I had never heard it before. And that's why I feel that it is so necessary to stay in the spaces, because I need to remember not to forget. If I go away from if I get out of the spaces, I've seen this happen numerous times to people, those old beliefs, like they start to creep back in. So like by keeping myself in community with people on the path at all various, I don't really believe in levels of the path. Like I'm not a big believer in like quantity of recovery equaling quality of recovery. I'm a big believer in like every day in each present moment, like can I use these practices? Can I remember why I'm doing it? And by staying in the spaces, like that's what I can remember. And again, I just really commend you all for what you've built in a relatively short amount of time. Like the Phoenix has become just a major source of support to people all over the country, maybe beyond at this point as well. And, I see it's starting to get going here in Alabama as well. And I'm excited to be a part of doing that geographically as well. I know we've like contributed with the Recovery Dharma meetings and stuff, and that's been wonderful. But I would love to like go. I love to climb. I love to do yoga. So I would love to start to run events like that here as well. I've gone through the training. I just, again, living a balanced life, finding, not trying to do too much, because if you try to do too much, sometimes, if you try to go too fast, you don't get too far type thing. So I really love what you all have done. I love just being able to be a part of it. And yeah, if you guys ever want me to come back and spin some more metaphors, I'm happy to do it.
Oh yeah, the door is forever open for you, Randy.
Forever. Yeah, this is definitely one of my very favorite conversations we've had, and it was so very meant to be on this day. And thank you for those kind words about the Phoenix, and I mean, just echoing that big time for Recovery Dharma and for you personally. I think I originally reached out to you even just to launch this partnership because I Googled, and one of the conversations you've had with someone was on YouTube, and I was like, he's probably kind of a famous Recovery Dharma guy. Like, I don't know if he'll answer my email, and he did. And then that started this relationship because you were just so open from the very beginning, and it's just, I love where it's grown, and the just ripples that come from each interaction that all of us, anybody is having out in the world in this community is just so. I mean, I don't have a word big enough for how much it just makes me feel so happy to be part of all of it.
Applesauce. You just got to come up with a word every now and then. Just randomly. Applesauce. Yeah, no, I don't know about you all listeners, but I am hankering for a Recovery Dharma meeting. It's been a minute since I've went, but after hearing Randy kind of wax poetic about the things that go on there, I'm ready for another one again. Mm-hmm. And if you need to find where some Recovery Dharma meetings are happening, you can always go to recoverydharma.org. And there's a central hub in the Phoenix app. You pop in a Phoenix app and you can not only find Recovery Dharma, but you can find Smart Recovery. And if you happen to be interested in Smart Recovery and Recovery Dharma, but work in the food and beverage industry, you should check out Ben's Friends too. We have a ton of organizations within the Phoenix app, all there. And I love how Liz said it earlier. It's our battle cry. I just imagine people running into the middle of a field. If you find one of us, you find all of us. So download the Phoenix app and go in there, check out all of the different partner organizations that are in the Phoenix app, and maybe I'll see you at a Recovery Dharma meeting soon.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. It's been totally applesauce. I've had a great time, and I really appreciate you and the work that you do, the generosity and service that you provide, and I wish you luck in speaking with all the various people and sharing their stories as well. It's really meaningful.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on, and thank you all for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next episode of the Rise, Recover, Live podcast.